Hey everybody, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties and the fact that you signed up and showed up and then I wasn't there. I hate it so much. I wanted to record the session anyway so you could at least have access to it and we could start the conversation. So let's do the thing anyway. Thank you so much for your patience. All right, we're here to talk about session recordings. Let me lead off with just a little bit about myself before we get into it. So, this is a picture of me. I'm talking about A/B testing at a WordPress conference, and that used to be all I really talked about was A/B testing. So, started off with a math background and then went into computer science, then got into conversion rate optimization as an engineer first, and I thought this is all we need. This is all it takes. We have A/B tests, we have statistically significant results. We're going to optimize our websites and everything will be great. Somewhere along the way, I started to realize that to really succeed at this stuff, you still have to tap into the feelings of the actual visitors on the other side of the website. And furthermore, just as importantly, in order to get buy in and understanding for your results and for the changes you propose, you need to tap into the feelings of your team and your leadership. And so nowadays, I still spend a lot of time in Google Analytics, but I spend about as much time trying to work on and understand and communicate feelings. And that is what I love about session recordings. So, this is where I would have gotten to learn a little bit about you. Unfortunately, don't have the chance, but there will be a way to follow up at the end, and I would still love to hear about how does this land with you? How much of this is relevant to you? So, there's a question I wish I could have asked. So, now let's talk about the whole point of session recordings, right? Why are they so great? Why did I try to show up and talk about them for an hour? So, I think that the key to session recordings is that they're great vehicles for feeling empathy and great tools for storytelling. So I'll ask you to look at this image on the screen. This is a screenshot from Google Analytics and ask you, how do you feel looking at this screenshot? How does it feel? I'm going to guess that you might feel a little bit of curiosity if you're into this kind of stuff, maybe a little confusion, but I don't think you're feeling any really strong feelings, like rage or anguish or joy. So let's look at another tool we have. It's a heat map, right? So I'll ask you the same question. When you look at this heat map screenshot, how do you feel? And I'm guessing it's largely the same. You might be curious, you might be confused, but nothing too intense. So next I'll ask you to watch this GIF, and it's on a loop, so we'll let it go one or two times and see what's going on here. So click, 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 click. Okay, we're back to the top. So somebody's trying to fill out a form to access a demo of a B2B marketing platform. And let's watch how that goes for them. Okay, so they got this new form field that appeared out of nowhere. They click, nothing happened. So I'll ask you the same thing. How do you feel watching this? And I'm going to guess that some folks out there they feel a little frustrated maybe because you've been in a situation like this. You've had a form that didn't work on you. It's very frustrating to see that. And it's very easy to watch a recording of someone else having a similar experience and feel how that feels. It's very easy to tap into that. And your ability to tap into that is not because you're some sort of a UX expert or a conversion rate optimization pro or anything like that. Just about anyone can watch this and tap into that feeling. You could probably show this to your uncle who knows nothing about marketing or UX, and he could say the same thing. Oh, I hate when that happens because we've had this experience. Whereas, show this to your uncle, and I mean, I don't know what your uncle does, but odds are he wouldn't know what to make of it. It wouldn't mean anything to him. So, this is what I love about session recordings is they're really easy to emote with, to empathize with, and that makes them great tools for storytelling and communication. On the other side of it, though, if they're so great, right, why don't we just use them day in and day out? And so the answer to that, the first answer to that is they take time, right? So if you imagine you have 1,000 sessions per day on your site and they're about a minute and a half each, you are creating 25 hours of session recording material per day. So you literally cannot possibly process it all already. And some of you have way more than that. So that doesn't scale, that doesn't even scan. You can't do anything with that. The scarier aspect of this is that you can also make some dubious conclusions based on this data. So you're going to have to sample your session recordings to analyze them. And the A/B testing guy in me gets really nervous about that because sampling bias is a thing. You could make a bad decision. And I wanted to walk through an example of exactly what that might look like. So here we have the PageSense homepage, the website, and we're watching a recording. And here's what we notice. The page loads and the visitor scrolls almost immediately. They're not really looking at that hero section at all, which is that's interesting. That's a little disappointing maybe, work went into that. Um, so imagine you're going to watch 100 session recordings because you want to analyze user behavior on this homepage. And as you watch them, let's imagine you see this over and over again, right? You see the same thing. Like lots and lots of people just skip over the hero section. Not everybody, but lots of visitors are just skipping it, right? And so you wonder what's up with that. And this is particularly painful because there's this element in the hero, this get an overview link, which plays a video, which is a great rundown of how the platform works. And let's say out of those 100 session recordings you watched, only 4 session recordings involved clicking and watching that video. That's kind of disappointing, right? It's right there in the hero, it's prominent. And if you see only a 4% conversion rate for that particular action, that feels kind of bad. You might think, well, before I go into what you might think, I guess my plan was to ask you, what would you do about this based on this data? You see people skipping the hero section. You see very, very few people watching the video, despite its prominent location at the top of the page. So what would you think? And me personally, I would be inclined to think, well, something's wrong with the hero. We should drastically revamp it. And I would also think, this video doesn't seem to be doing much. It doesn't seem to be that important. It doesn't even need to be there. Maybe it's a distraction in the hero section. We need to take it out, simplify, right? And what I ask you to imagine now is, we didn't watch the whole recording, right? We're focused on this page. Suppose that all 4 of those video viewers went on to sign up for the software, right? This changes the equation drastically. It's no longer, oh, only 4 out of 100 even viewed it. It's literally 4 out of 4 who viewed it converted. And now all of a sudden I care. And now all of a sudden I feel really silly for suggesting that we might get rid of that link. If anything, I might want to make it more prominent on the page. So this is how I could have easily gone down the wrong path after watching 100 session recordings. And I want to underscore that 100 session recordings. It took forever to watch, and I still got it wrong. This is just terrible, terrible failure mode. So let's talk about how to flip that and avoid this outcome. And in order to avoid it, we need to be sure that we focus on good data. We need to focus on data that we want to pay attention to versus letting noise intrude into the decision-making process. And we also need to do it in a way that saves time, right? We don't want to spend hundreds of hours watching these videos. Even if it is helpful, that's just too much time. So the way we're going to do that is specifically, we're going to think about who we're watching before we even start the screen recordings, before we even sit down to watch. We're going to think about who are we watching and why. And then I'm going to talk about some ways that you can get help and enlist others to share this data parsing and analysis with you. And I think that that is better, not just because it saves you time, but it brings in other perspectives. So who should we target, right? We said we're going to target a segment that matters. I'm going to suggest, if this is new, if you haven't done this a lot, that you should start with converters. So somebody who takes an action of value on your site, whether they're making a purchase or filling out a lead form that goes to the sales team, or maybe they're signing up for your app, depending. But one of these actions that's tied as closely as possible to revenue, rather than really any of the other ways you're able to slice these recordings. And so I would have loved the opportunity to ask you for your website, what's a conversion, right? What do converters do on your site? What kind of site do you have? And the answer here is that whichever type you have, session recordings can be helpful for you, right? Whether it's an e-com and people are making purchases, or it's software and you have self-serve signups, all of these are interesting. I was just kind of curious about who is most interested in this technology. So find me and let's talk about it after the fact if you can forgive me for wasting your time. All right. So back to why converters, right? Why am I recommending that? it's a very powerful way to cut down the total volume of data for one, right? It's just a fraction of all those sessions. You might wish it was a bigger fraction, but if you start with 1,000 hours and you cut it down to converters, you're going to be down to 40 hours or less. Um, in addition to that, you obviously care about the actions they're taking, right? These are the most qualified visitors on your site. By the time you watch this recording, these visitors are actually customers, so they're definitely relevant. And then the last consideration is, if you're going to sit and watch a bunch of recordings, it's it can be kind of time consuming, it can be kind of draining, but watching people do the thing that your site is meant for actually feels kind of good. It's inspiring. This is a more enjoyable thing to watch than some of the other possibilities. Such as, and so here are some other suggestions. If you've already done converters and you want to make another pass and do another analysis, another great segment is almost converters. So people who got all the way up to the last step, maybe they got to checkout or they got to the sign up page and then they left. And some of them just leave the site. Some of them go back to another page and then leave. But watching these recordings, it's agonizing, right? Because they're so close. And at the same time, you can learn a lot from them. So other segments that are useful to look at, content downloaders, free trial users, depending on your site, your product, these are people that have taken a first step toward doing business with you. So figuring out where do they go, what do they seek out on their way to making a decision is very interesting data to have. And then also, if you're like most people and you kind of suspect that your navigation is terrible, then watching people actually interact with it in real time versus just looking at a report in Google Analytics, that can be one way to get an understanding for what's confusing, what could be better, what's overwhelming. So these are all segments you might consider too. But you should start with converters if you haven't already watched converter session recordings. So let's talk for just a moment about how you're actually going to accomplish this. Before you go press the button and start the recordings, right? How are we going to get down to just the ones we want to watch? So there's two basic options. The easiest is by page view. So if a converter lands on a thank you page or something like that after they convert, that's all you need. You're going to gather all your recordings, and then you're going to go in and you're going to just filter down to sessions where people viewed that thank you page and you're done. So that's super straightforward, good to go. That might not apply to your case if you have a single page app or if there are other people visiting that same success page for whatever reason that gets complicated. You need a custom event or a goal set up and you can filter by that. And so this might involve a little bit of developer help, but it shouldn't be a really heavy lift because you're probably firing some sort of a conversion pixel to social platforms or something when that happens already, which means you got the trigger and you just need to go add another tag or another event on that trigger that goes back to your session recordings platform. So once you know in advance how you're going to filter down these recordings, then you officially have permission to press the green button and actually gather these recordings. And now you wait. Okay, so it might take, depending on your traffic and your conversions level, you might want to give it a month. You definitely want to wait until you have at least 50 session recordings of interest. More is okay. Less than that is maybe just not enough. So it's typical to let these run for a few weeks or a month, and then you come back and they're all waiting for you, and now you're ready for analysis. So we'll talk about that next. All right, so it's time to watch these session recordings. I'm going to strongly encourage you to enlist outside help with this. Even if you have the time and you don't mind spending it, I still think it's a good idea to get other people involved in the process for a few reasons. For one, it scales. For two, it's sort of a way to show off what you're doing and tell the story that in a way that can be helpful within the organization. And I guess for three, you will get input from people that you would not have come up with on your own, especially in your 38th hour of watching session recordings. So please consider this process that I'm going to outline, where you start the analysis and then you bring in some stakeholders from your company, and then you potentially outsource further analysis to a freelancer, and then you bring it all back together yourself. So I want to walk through what that looks like. So it does start with you. You have to do it yourself. And I picked the number 10 kind of out of thin air. I think it's about right. You don't want to watch 30 or 40 because that's a bit much and you'll get distracted, you'll lose focus, you'll start to hate your life. 3 or 4 is definitely not enough, though. You really need enough to get familiar with the playback options and the tools that you have. And you need enough to start to see patterns and make some decisions about like what matters and what's just kind of a random one-off occurrence that one visitor happened to do. So as you watch these, say, first 10 recordings, you don't need a super rigorous plan for how you're going to analyze them. You just kind of should take notes. Take notes if you use a whiteboard, write stuff on the whiteboard, notepad, Google Doc. Per video, just note what you're seeing, anything that's interesting. And as you watch further videos, look for patterns and repeated behaviors. So I have a few questions here that are prompts for how you might decide where to focus as you watch. These will get you started. And then as you start to see specific behaviors to your site, you will refine these questions into observations about what people are doing and maybe why are they doing that and is this really happening on my site and things like that. So more on that to come in just a moment. Before we get into that though, I just want to talk about the operational part of watching these videos and how you can save yourself some time. And as you enlist your team to help or a freelancer to help more, you should pass just these 2 tips along to save a little time in the playback. So for long session recordings, there are 2 tools you need. One is the playback speed. So if you kick it up to 2x for a long session recording, you can still see everything that someone's doing. You can still see where do they go, what do they click, where do they slow down, but it cuts the time in half that it takes to watch it. And then for a session recording with a really long pause or several long pauses, you don't need to watch those pauses, right? Most likely they just switched tabs. Maybe they went to get some coffee or something like that. So skip pauses will jump through those sections and only show you interactions on the site. So use both of these so that you should never spend probably more than 10 minutes on a single session recording, no matter how long it is. And some will be pretty long, but this will cut them way down in size. It is important to slow down to real time, so turn off skip pauses, go back to 1x speed when you get close to the conversion event that you're watching for, as well as any other behavior you're starting to gain an interest in. So that could be navigation, that could be content people linger over. Watch that stuff in real time because while 2x speed is efficient for getting a sense of the facts of the session recording, to tap into that empathy, you really need to see it at 1x speed. So be sure you watch all those parts in real time. So you've been through 10 or so session recordings, you've taken a bunch of notes, you've started to see some patterns, and you've refined your big sprawling mass of questions down to a handful of questions, right? The ones that seem important, the ones that you've observed in multiple recordings, the ones that are tied to conversion in ways that seem significant to you. Can trust your instincts here. So each question at least ties back to one session recording as well, right? You can say, okay, I saw this in this video and it made me wonder, question. So there's some sample questions in the right column there. These are questions that in some cases you can just go answer immediately. If you think your form is broken and you saw somebody struggle with it, you can see which browser and operating system they were on. You can go try to reproduce the error, and if it's an error, open a ticket right now, get your form fixed. It's really surprising and always embarrassing how common it is to find errors like this from session recordings. So if you find that, just go ahead and move on it right away and refine your questions back down to the stuff that you're not sure about. Maybe you couldn't reproduce it, but you still want to check into it. Or maybe it's an open-ended question like how often do visitors abandon the form, visit pricing, and return? You don't have an answer. You're not sure if that's even really a thing yet, but you do want to know more. So now's the fun part. You now have this kind of a highlight reel of some segments of recordings that you watched and you saw an interesting behavior and you want to know more about it. You maybe saw a thing or two that led you to a bug fix already. That's interesting stuff too. So at this point you want to reach out and you want to reach out kind of cross-departmentally. So this doesn't have to live within marketing or within UX or optimization or whatever your function is. It shouldn't. You should be able to recruit somebody from sales, product, customer experience. These people will all care about what's going on the website for different reasons and with different perspectives, but they'll all be interested. And so what you do is you do a quick statement of what you're up to. And so let me throw that your way. I would say we want to increase conversions on the website. And to do that, we want to better understand the user experience and how people use the website. To do that, we've gathered some session recordings and we're analyzing them. I've already analyzed a batch and found some interesting things. I want to show you some playback of people on the website and get your input. It'll only take 15 minutes. So this is a meeting people will be happy to say yes to. They will be happy to attend. They will have a good time. So I hope you can set it up. And when you do set it up, just spend a couple minutes repeating the purpose of the meeting, reminding everyone while they're there, and then just get into the playback. So it's like a movie night. Show a visitor on the site, talk about what you observed, what you think, what you might do about it, and then open up the floor and let people tell you what they think. And what I hope you'll find is they're leaned in, they're interested, and they have ideas. Not all the ideas will be good. That's okay. Not all of my ideas are good, but you will have an engaged audience internally with this project that you're involved in. And if that happens, then number one, you've gotten some insights that you might not have had before the meeting. And number two, you're in a position to make the ask. And the ask is, so at this point, you know how long it takes you to go through a batch of, say, 10 recordings, and you know more or less what you want to look for. And so you just say, hey, we've got another 50 recordings, and I really want to process them and get a little deeper on these topics. Who here would have the bandwidth to go through about 10 of them? It should take you about whatever it takes, half an hour. And just share your notes, share your feedback, share your thoughts. And hopefully you'll get a couple people who say sure, who think actually this is really cool. They really had a good time at the meeting and they're now curious to know more about this. So if you can do that, bam, you got help. You don't have to watch them all yourself. And you're going to get viewpoints that you wouldn't have had if you'd just done it all by yourself. Would have loved to ask you if that's even feasible, right? I don't know of everyone who signed up if you do have a team and a broader organization you can reach out to, or if some people are in it all by themselves. So I'm curious, but unfortunately wasn't able to ask. I'm still curious to know, though, if this is something you're going to pursue. Whether you can do that or not, though, another option you have is to outsource it. And so if you seek to do this, and I think you should, do not miss the mission part. Do explain the same thing you would have explained to get your team to come to the meeting. We're trying to increase conversions on our website, and to do that, we want to understand how users navigate and use the site. And to do that, we gather these session recordings and we're analyzing them. If you tell any freelancer why you're asking them to do what they're doing, they will care more, they will do a better job, and you'll get better results from them. So share that, share your questions and some recordings for them to process, and also encourage them just to share whatever's on their minds. If they have wild ideas or if they see something that's not relevant to one of your questions, you want that input. So don't be real rigid with the structure. You just want comments and timestamps from the videos so you can reference back. And that's the same thing you would get from your team. Another word on this outsourcing thing, I do want to make this case that you probably wouldn't outsource your Google Analytics research and reporting, at least not to somebody who wasn't highly trained and specialized that you trusted a lot. You probably wouldn't outsource A/B test analysis to just any random person on the internet, but just about any random person on the internet, and by that I guess I mean a virtual assistant or a UX freelancer, even junior or beginner level, an intern. These people can process session recordings and give you valid input on what they're seeing because of the empathy thing, because they are also users of websites and they know what it feels like to be confused or to struggle, and they will give you stuff that's useful. They don't have to be experts, and you'll be getting that extra input that wouldn't have occurred to you. So maybe comparable to, say, user testing, where unless you have a very specialized product, just about anybody can do a successful user test for your website, and they will teach you things that you didn't see. In the same way, processing session recordings works that way. So I want to encourage you to find help and process more. So you looked at some yourself. You got your team to help you, hopefully. You might have delegated some out to an assistant. That's great. So now you need to bring it all in, and you do need to go in and validate some of what you got, right? Not everyone will get everything right. Sometimes there are artifacts of the platform that make it seem like something's broken, but it really wasn't broken. So you'll want to just verify that what people say they saw, they really saw. Just do a spot check. And you're looking for patterns again, right? Did you validate that something strange happens on a regular basis? Did anybody have a good suggestion for why that might be happening, or what would be a better experience for the user? So you start to collect these things, and you're going to put them into two buckets, basically. So the first is stuff you just need to fix, and then the second is stuff you need to investigate further. You need to know more. So I'll give some examples of both. All right. We talked about this a little bit already, right? With the broken form. If you see somebody trying to fill out a form, like I showed you at the beginning, and they can't do it, you go try to reproduce that error, and if you can reproduce it, get it fixed immediately. That's kind of obvious, but it's crazy how often we find that happening. So another thing you might uncover is a part of the site that you already kind of knew was not great, but it hasn't been a priority. And after watching user after user linger over this confusing section that you know needs improvement, and realizing, okay, this is something that our customers, our converters, are spending time with, and you know how to improve it, you'll probably prioritize improving it. Another easy one to me is if you see a lot of people trying to click something that's not an actual link, and you think you know where they're trying to get, and that destination already exists, I would just make it clickable. I probably wouldn't A/B test something like that. I would just say, hey, I see users trying to get somewhere from here. Let's let them do it. So the other class of questions and observations you have are more like lines of inquiry, right? So you see people coming back to a page over and over, and then they go elsewhere, and then they come back to that page again. Why do they need to visit the page 3 or 4 times before they convert? Is it leaving something out? Is the information they want buried and hard to access? You don't know how to solve that, but it could point to an issue. So you want to follow up on that. Are you seeing people almost but not quite click on things in the nav? That's pretty common. Maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe you're using jargon in your navigation and there's something that you could improve. So these types of questions that you see on the screen, these are things that you're going to follow up on in another way. You can't just go fix them, but you're not going to let them go. And so here's some of the techniques you might use to follow up on these things. So you can run an A/B test in some cases. That's where maybe you have a few ideas for what might be better, and you have enough conversions and traffic to run an experiment. So that's a great follow-up. Another one you can do that's super easy is a poll. So if it's a question along the lines of what's missing from this page, my favorite thing to do is add a poll that pops up after maybe 30 seconds and literally says what's missing from this page. It's direct and it's humble, and you will get responses and people will tell you what they're looking for. And if it makes sense to you, you can just go add that content. So another couple options, user testing. That's where you can give somebody a mission that you know will require them to get the information that's in the questionable part of the site, or will require an interaction with the element that seems to trigger strange interactions. And you just watch them do it and talk it out. And then sometimes you can throw data at the problem too. So you just set up some custom events and let it run for a while, and then go back and you can answer your question in a report with Google Analytics. So some method like this of following up is going to be appropriate for your bigger questions. And then this is the last piece that I wanted to share. And I won't read this to you because you can read, but I just want to say if you've gone through the work to get to this point where you've targeted a segment that matters to your business, and you've gathered this data and you've processed it, maybe some of it yourself, some of it with the team, some of it with an outsourced function, and you've brought it back together and you've made some improvements of stuff that you didn't realize was broken, but it was broken. And then you've also begun the process of following up on some of these bigger questions that don't have an easy answer. This is an amazing story to tell, and this is a story you can tell very compellingly because you have video. So back to the empathy and storytelling behind session recordings, you're in such a good position right now to share what you've done with leadership. So think about a quarterly business review, or even just an all hands meeting where you have the floor for, say, 5 minutes. You can tell this story, and you talk about what you went through, and you talk about how you uncovered some things that were broken, and then you can show an actual user on the site interacting with the broken part of the site. Everyone in the audience, they feel agony, they feel shame, they hate it so much. It's so hard to watch. And then you say, but we fixed it. We already fixed this. We saw it, we acted, it's solved. And everyone feels relief. And they're so impressed. And now you're a hero. And so then you go on and you introduce some of the more esoteric or open-ended questions that you're investigating. And you, again, you show a video. We keep seeing people do this. And we're not sure what it means, but here's what we're trying. Here's how we're following up. Okay, this makes you look so smart, right? And it's compelling, and you have everyone's attention because you're showing a video of the actual interaction from an actual user. It's way more it's way more interesting than a report from Google Analytics, a chart, a graph. And if you keep it quick and you don't ask too much attention from people, they will be fully engaged. This makes you look like you've done so much because you have, right? You've opened a new line of research, you've recruited internally and built bridges across departments. Amazing. You've maybe started to build this outsourced function so you can scale this research, and you are improving results for the website, improving experience for your visitors. You look like a hero. Everyone will love you, and everything will be great. My personal guarantee to you. So that's it. That's what I got about session recordings. I want to encourage you to go watch some, but more importantly, make it a team sport. Bring some other people in and get their input because in my experience, people really do like this stuff. They like to see people on their own website. So there's a lot more detail in a Google Doc that you can access at the URL on your screen. So briandavidhall.com/session-recordings. You can go there and opt in and get immediate access to a Google Doc. It's about 15 pages long. It's got more stuff on segments that you might want to target and how to target them. It's got information on kind of what you might see, what to do if you see it in a little more detailed fashion. It's got a template you can use for assigning this out to when you outsource the analysis as well. So I hope some of you will find that useful. Thank you again for watching. Thank you so much for your patience. I hate that I kept you waiting. I was not my intention. And if you can forgive me, I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on Twitter, and DMs are open if you want to tell me about how this went for you. If you have questions about this content, I would love to hear it. So thank you so much once again. And yeah, go watch some recordings. All right.